This time we get to hear from the great Kahan Zephaniah Hawkins.
Shalom, everyone. May the peace of Yahweh be with each and every one of you. Please be seated. You've come to the place that Yahweh has chosen to place His name, and this is the place where we receive all answers to really all questions and all problems in life. I want to start real quick because we're starting a little late. So quickly turn over to page 564 in your book of Yahweh, and we're going to look at Isaiah 53:7. And this is speaking about Yeshua Messiah. It's a prophecy of Him, which has now occurred already. And it says on page 564, Isaiah 53:7. He was oppressed and He was afflicted, yet He opened not His mouth. He was led as a lamb to the slaughter, and as a sheep before its shearers is silent, so He opened not His mouth. I don't know if anyone has experienced that before with a sheep, but they're like that. They don't make a fuss when you're shearing them. Now let's go to Matthew 27:12, page 757. Matthew 27:12, page 757. And we're going to read 12 to 14. But when He was accused by the chief priests and elders, He answered nothing. Then Pilate said to Him, "Do you not hear how many things they testify against you?" But He refused to respond, not to one word, so that the governor marveled greatly. Now, what was going on here is a legal proceedings, and the response that Yeshua Messiah was given was a legal plea, in essence. This is what this is talking about, Yeshua Messiah doing in these scriptures. And I got this out of Time magazine, November 10th, 1967, but you can find this in other authoritative sources. But Yisrayl Supreme Court Justice Haim Cohn, an expert in the history of Jewish legal tradition, says, when Jesus was asked by Pilate if He was king of the Jews, He answered, "You have said so." In effect, says Cohn, now this is the Supreme Court Justice of Israel in 1967. In effect, says Cohn, Yeshua Messiah made a plea of nolo contendere. Now, he used the word Jesus, but this is the plea that Israel Hawkins made when he was accused of these, falsely accused of these crimes by the local authorities here, which are just extensions of the chief priests and elders. They're really just an agency for the Catholic Church. And so Pastor, when he found out that Yeshua Messiah made this plea, he wanted to make the same plea, and he did. He pleaded no contest, which is remaining silent. In fact, the authorities say that this is where that plea came from. You know, you have guilty, not guilty, and no contest. And no contest, in essence, what you're saying is, I'm not going to argue with you. You're going to find me guilty no matter what. That's what you do. And so you just kind of let the proceedings go, and the judge does what they want to do. They consider you guilty when you do that. They have no mercy in these courts. And so the pastor did that, and this was another one of these situations, like the pastor mentioned, an antitype, where you can go back and you can see that he's following the same pattern of Yeshua Messiah. Now I want to read to you, because this has ultimately resulted in, remember the pastor said that he already knew what the outcome of this case was going to be, and he wasn't the one being judged. We were the ones being judged. We were the ones that were actually on trial. And also the city of Abelin, as to whether or not we would have faith, stay in the house of Yahweh, believe the one Yahweh has chosen and sent.
Praise Yahweh!
Now remember, this is the pastor was falsely accused of doing all sorts of things and being worse than Al Capone, famously accused of being worse than Al Capone, and yet the prophecies were that he is going to complete this work. Now I want to read to you the ultimate order that came from these courts, what the ultimate result of this case was, because they're not really trumpeting it on the news. They like to put on the news when we're accused of something, but they don't like to put on the news when we're proven that we didn't do anything. So this is the order discharging defendant from community supervision under deferred adjudication. Now, this is from Judge Korn. Remember that he was going to help us, whether he knew it or not. And on this day, the court reviewed all proceedings in the above styled and numbered cause. The defendant, Yisrayl Hawkins, had therefore been placed on community supervision under Section 5A of Article 4212 of the Texas Code of Criminal Procedure for the offense of unlawful use of child labor. Of course, this accusation is kind of like they would have in the world if they had a bake sale and the children were helping selling the brownies. If that was us, we'd be accused of unlawful use of child labor. You know, this is the way that this system is so contorted. There was no unlawful use of child labor, but that was what they had to come up with ultimately in order to get rid of this thing, because they had to get rid of this. We didn't. They had to get rid of it because it was so flawed. I remember I was very familiar with the legal aspects and the facts of the case and the allegations, and I remember I looked at the lawyers and I said, Isn't the prosecutor running into a brick wall with this thing by trying to take it to trial? And they just looked at me. They didn't want to answer that question, but that's the case. They knew they couldn't take this to trial. So as the trial date got closer and closer, they had to work out a deal where this thing wouldn't go to trial, because if the trial actually was held, it would show that the government itself was the one who was breaking the law here, not the House of Yahweh, not Yisrayl Hawkins. They don't back down lightly. The government does not back down lightly. It has now been made known to the court that the defendant has satisfactorily completed part of his community supervision. It is in the best interest of society. He doesn't know how significant those words are. Now, this is the governments of the land. This is an actual decree by the governments of the land that it is in the best interest of society that the defendant, Yisrayl Hawkins, be discharged from the probation. He really doesn't know how true that is, but it's true, and he agreed with it. He signed it. They don't say these words lightly either. The defendant has requested an early discharge from community supervision, and the defendant's motion is granted. It is therefore ordered, adjudged, and decreed, that's all three, which is pretty significant, I'm sure, that the plea of guilty, he didn't enter a plea of guilty, it was nolo contendere, which is what Yeshua Messiah did, but then they say it's a plea of guilty. That's how they turned it around, because then the judge, in essence, says what he wants to for the plea. Entered in this cause, B and the same is set aside. That means it's eliminated. The plea isn't even there. And the indictment or complaint or information, so they're not even exactly sure what it was. So they just want to cover all possibilities, you know. It was either an indictment, a complaint, or an information. But whatever it was, we want it to be dismissed. It says the same is hereby dismissed, and the defendant is hereby discharged and terminated from the terms and conditions of community supervision as of this date. And that was May 3rd, 2010. Now this wasn't just an early release from community service. And it's funny because that's all the pastor does is community service. He was actually discharged to do more community service. But to do it the right way, and as he was anyway. But this is the elimination of the case. Not only is the case gone, the accusation is gone, the charging instrument is gone. It's as if it never was. In legal terms, it's a nullity. And this is just what Yeshua Messiah did, the exact same thing. But as we know, Yeshua Messiah's job was different at that time. And the prophecies foretold that he would be murdered for righteousness' sake. And we would be persecuted for righteousness' sake. Yisrayl Hawkins would be persecuted. And that's exactly what occurred. Now, up against the great powers of the state. Now, I want to move on to something a little related. But I was going down the Oak Forest, and we're putting the signs up there. And I love these signs because they make you think. I saw a sign, and one of them said, the House of Yahweh, the source of all knowledge. And I was thinking, if it wasn't for the House of Yahweh, it's not just the source of all knowledge, it's the source of any knowledge. You really don't have any knowledge without the House of Yahweh at all. On anything. You really don't. if we were to even discuss a question like what you had for breakfast, a lot of us wouldn't remember, and we certainly wouldn't be able to prove it in a court of law. There's only, we wouldn't. And so it's when one cuts oneself off from the house of Yahweh, meaning the one sent, and one chooses not to agree with him, you're cutting yourself off from all knowledge, and that's what the world has done. That's what originated the world. It was Cain murdered Abel because his works were righteousness, and Cain was cut off from Yahweh, and he was cut off from the source of all knowledge. But they still needed knowledge. Just because you cut yourself off from knowledge doesn't mean you don't need any. And I remember that Pastor has said that man cannot predict, even what will occur to him tomorrow. And I read and he gave the example of a plane hitting a building and killing some people. And I just recently saw in the news a couple weeks ago, a guy was jogging on the beach, and he had his earphones on. He was listening to music, and a man miles away was driving his own little homemade plane, and the propeller fell off. And he thought, okay, well, I can land this because it's designed to glide. Supposedly it can fly without power. And so he sees the beach, and he sees the people on the beach, and he's steering to avoid the people on the beach. And then the oil starts leaking out of the engine because the propeller fell off, and it got on the windshield of the plane. So he couldn't see where he was going. And he hit this man directly and killed him instantly. And the man didn't even know there was a plane behind him. The witnesses said he just kept jogging, and then the plane hit him. And this is the nature of man's knowledge of the future. We don't even know what's going to occur to us a minute from now, or 10 minutes from now, or a day from now. And it's the same not just with the future, but it's the same with the past and even the present. Mankind actually does not even know what's going on right now. And they can't tell you what went on in the past. And so they've come up with, but they've had to come up with, and they kind of recognize this, and they've come up with this system of falsely finding knowledge. And I want to just get a little bit into this system that they have for finding knowledge, because they still need a system for finding knowledge, even though they've cut themselves off from the source of all knowledge. So they've found a way to falsely create knowledge. And I want to tell you about this because many of us are kind of relying on this system without knowing that it's a religion. And it's called the Socratic method. And it was come up with by Socrates, who was a Greek, I think a Hellenist, and in other words, he was a Hebrew, descendant of Abraham. And it's called the Socratic method, or the method of Valentius, or Socratic debate. And it's named after the classical Greek philosopher Socrates. And it's a form of inquiry and debate between individuals with opposing viewpoints based on asking and answering questions to stimulate critical thinking and to illuminate ideas. It is called the dialectical method, and it involves an oppositional discussion. Okay? And this is what the Socratic method is when you're involved in argument. An oppositional discussion in which the defense of one point of view is pitted against the defense of another. One participant may lead another to contradict him in some way, strengthening the inquirer's own point. Okay, and this is what you see in the legal system. It's called the adversarial system. It's a system where they honestly believe that they can take two people with two different points of view, and by pitting them together, come up with the truth through this method. And you see this is not just in the court systems. They use this in science. They use this in choosing their leaders. They choose their leaders using the Socratic method. It's called the presidential debates, if you ever see those. This is what they teach in the schools of higher learning as the way to find the truth. And when you're seeing, on paper it almost looks like it makes sense, especially if you're an 18-year-old child. As Kahan brought out last week, 6-year-old, you remember everything as truth. Well, if you're an 18-year-old or 19-year-old and you're in Yale, that's truth too to you forever, because Yale makes you, and you don't want to go against what Yale teaches, because then you're not Yale anymore. Yale's no big deal. And so they're taught this adversarial system, which is let me just read one more thing about this, because there's another kind of an interesting point about this. It says, Socrates generally applied his method of examination to concepts that seem to lack any concrete definition. Okay, and they do this every day. This is how the Catholic Church, their writings are. The key moral concepts at the time. Okay, so we would apply it to the key moral concepts of the time. The virtues of piety, wisdom, temperance, courage, and justice. Such an examination challenged the implicit moral beliefs of the interlocutors, which are the arguers, bringing out inadequacies and inconsistencies in their beliefs and usually resulting in a puzzlement known as aporia. So what this is saying, if I have to listen to that again, is that after all this, all you end up with is a puzzlement. All you end up with, and this is what when you go with the lawyer and you say, yeah, but can't we read scriptures? Isn't that free speech? Well, could be, maybe. It depends on what the argument is that comes back at you. There's no real answer in this system of the adversarial law. And that's what this legal system is called. It's called the adversarial system, and it's a system of law that relies on the contest between each advocate representing his or her party's position. Okay, so it relies on this argument to find the truth. It relies on the contest. This is what and this is how even how they make laws. That's why they have the Republicans and the Democrats. And everything they do is a big argument. And it's become to the point where the whole world is one gigantic argument over everything. If you've noticed on TV, everything is an argument. All the news is an argument. This is this way that they've decided that they're going to come to a truth because they've cut themselves off from Yahweh. Okay, it's usually a jury or judge trying to determine the truth of a case, okay, by pitting one side against the other and then having them argue about it. And the great example is this presidential debate, because if you think that there's some sense to any of this, you just need to watch one of these presidential debates and ask yourself, is anyone here really being honest with the issues, and is there any truth really coming out in this debate? And I think if anyone has ever seen these debates, they know that no, it's just grandstanding, it's showboating, it's just all a big show and kind of name calling and try to get. There's no actual attempt to get to the truth of the matter. There's no actual attempt to find real knowledge. So they have a system here that they think will work, but it doesn't. And I had every time I go into these courts, I'm kind of running out of time, but I had it reminds me of this show. There was once a comedy show on. I'll go do this real quick. They had, it was a British comedy, and the guy walks into an office. This is the legal system. And he says, there's a woman sitting at a desk, and he says, I'd like to buy an argument. And she says, well, would you like one, or will you want the 10-pack? And he says, well, no, I'll just take one. I'll start easy. So he takes it, he pays for his argument, he goes into a room, and there's a man sitting at a desk, and he says, what can I do for you? And he says, well, I bought an argument, and I'd like to have an argument. And he says, oh, yeah, that's easy. You just go to the front desk, and you pay $5. And he says, well, I already did that. And he says, no, you didn't. And she says, so the man says, I did. I just went in there and I paid for an argument. He says, no, you didn't pay for an argument. He says, yeah, I did. I have the receipt. And he says, no, that's not a receipt. He says, you're not arguing. You're just being contrarian. He says, I'm not being contrarian. He says, now you've got 3 arguments. You owe me $15. He says, I do not. It goes back and forth. This is the legal system. Don't buy these CSI shows or whatever else shows they have on TV where they look like they're being honest with their arguments. They're not. It's just like that show. And this is kind of the system that we're kind of bound by, in the world today. Let's turn over real quick to 1 Corinthians 6:1 on page 890. 1 Corinthians 6:1, page 890. Okay, how dare any of you, when he has a dispute against a brother, take it to court before unrighteous judges and not before the saints? Do you not know that the saints will judge the world, and if the world will be judged by you, are you not competent to judge trivial matters? And then he goes on to say in verse 7, why, the very fact that you have lawsuits among you means that you have been completely defeated already. Okay, this is a matter of taking things to the worldly courts. Now look at the word completely. Completely defeated. This is how important this is. This isn't a minor matter. Why not rather be wronged? In other words, why pick this adversarial system? Why choose this religion, even if it means you're going to have to sacrifice something? Why not rather be wronged? Why not rather be cheated? Knowing what the house of Yahweh is, that it comes from Yahweh, why not, if you have any doubts, about the house, which you shouldn't have, why not just give in anyway on this point? In order to avoid this big mess that we have out there, this big argument about, no, you didn't pay $5 for the argument. This is what they have going on, but it's not going to cost you $5. It's going to cost you $100,000. Now, wouldn't it be great if we didn't have to deal with these worldly courts? And wouldn't you, would you all leave this legal system if you had the opportunity to?
Praise Yahweh!
I mean, it does seem kind of foolish that someone would want to go into the worldly system when they want a position in the kingdom that is directly opposed by that system. Now, we have a way, Yahweh has provided a way for us to come out of this system legally. And they do this in business a lot because they know that they're sick of paying the $5 for the arguments in the business world. And so when you sign a contract with them, a lot of times you have to sign an arbitration agreement because that takes it out of this system that everyone sees is so absurd. You know, you just go through it once and you know this just isn't going to work. We can't do business this way. And in fact, it's part of the reason why you see the whole financial system coming down at this time. It's collapsing under the weight of its own corruption, and a large part of that is this civil lawsuit system. And so a lot of places, even the Muslims, have these courts they've set up, and people sign up and they can go into those courts instead, and they can bind themselves to those decisions. And so at the House of Yahweh, this is what we're going to do. We're going to give, everyone's going to have this opportunity to come out of this system completely. And I want to read to you agreement that we're going to make that is going to allow us to actually be judged by Yahweh above the beastly governmental system. This will take them off of our backs to a degree. Well, not perfectly, but pretty high degree. So I want to read you something real quick here. I got some other language. I'm not going to read the whole thing, but parts that are relevant. And this is what it says. It's an agreement that I'm personally making. I hereby choose and agree to have all matters of dispute or controversy between members of the House of Yahweh and myself settled by Yahweh's 613 laws. I understand and agree that the priests of the House of Yahweh are to determine and apply Yahweh's laws to all matters of dispute or controversy, and that they alone, under the authority and approval of the overseer, are to determine both the substance and the procedure of that law. Okay, and this is things that have to be covered. All of these things get decided by courts. Matters of witnesses, matters of evidence, matters of counsel, matters of appeal, matters of discovery, matters of investigation, matters of enforcement, fact, law, execution, education, cost, venue, forum, limitation, and publication. This is kind of like what you've got to do to these worldly courts, because just like they didn't know whether it was an indictment, a complaint, or an information, we got to cover all of our bases here, okay? And this is what we're doing. Unless mandated to do so by the laws of the land, I will not take any matter to worldly courts unless authorized to do so by the priests of the House of Yahweh. This is enforceable, and the courts of the land recognize this because they don't want these cases either. They really don't. They have enough to do without having to get messed up in people's little disagreements. The members have to. This is something we must do. Really, it is. It is my intent to grant the priests of the House of Yahweh the full authority to make decisions regarding any controversy or dispute to which I may be a party. I limit this authority only to the degree required by the laws of the governments that may otherwise have jurisdiction over a matter. Okay, because sometimes they don't know how much of this can be done. There's some cases where this can't apply. What we're saying is we want this to apply everywhere that it can. If there's some situation where the courts have to get involved, fine. We're not going to go against that law. But to the degree that we can do it, this is what we're going to do. It's really wonderful. It's an exodus of sorts from this mess that they call their judicial system. It's really a system of oppression masquerading as justice. That limitation only applies while those governments exist. Okay, so there's not going to be any limitation after they don't exist. And while they have the power to enforce those limitations on me. It is my intent, now this is the important part, that you have to have this intent, to transfer all authority to settle any type of dispute or controversy currently vested in worldly governments to the priests of the house of Yahweh to the degree that it is in my power to do so. So everyone can do their part to eliminate that power, and then the courts give you that authority. You can agree to have your disputes settled by someone else. They love it. They do it all the time. Most people don't have the foresight to figure out they're going to have disputes. This agreement applies to all matters of dispute or controversy, whether arising out of events, words, actions, contracts, or circumstances, past, present, or future. Okay, so this isn't to cover everything. I am bound forever by this covenant. I'm bound forever by this covenant, and I hope all of you are too, because I know that those who will rule as Yahweh rules would only choose this way. This would be the only way that they would choose. And now at this time, would you all please stand for the greatest teacher in the world, the great Kahan, Yisrayl Hawkins.
Praise Yahweh. Wow, what a crowd. Praise Yahweh. Say it all together. Say it all together now. 1, 2, 3. Praise Yahweh. There you go. You may be seated. Keep, praise Yahweh. I love you. Keep this zeal and love to the end, okay? There won't be an end for you if you do. May the peace of Yahweh be with each and every one of you. I've got a number of articles, but I don't want to read them. I want to get right into this lesson. And Yahweh set a feast for you in the presence of our enemies. And I do urge everyone, before you leave here, get you one of those things and sign it. One of those papers that Sophia just read. It's a way out of being judged by this world. And it works. They recognize it. It's their work. Praise Yahweh. Pentecost. I know it's not understood, and if I want you to really, really listen closely today. It's so amazing to me how Yahweh, I didn't plan the great Kohan Sophia Owen Hawkins sermon, but it couldn't have been put in a better place. But I know that Yahweh planned it, and I see this all the time in the work here. You know, we have the Acts of the Apostles. Well, now we have the Acts of the last day's work. And if you didn't get every word of that sermon, you really need to. You really need to listen to it again and again, and especially the young priest here. You need to understand what he was saying there. It's being recorded just like Yahweh had the Acts of the Apostles, the Acts of the Prophets, the Acts of Yeshua, had them recorded for you. It's so important that you get them and that you understand every word of what he said. Every word of what he said. But then also sign that. Now, I want you to concentrate on this sermon. If you're keeping this feast and you're not in unity with me right now, you're keeping it illegally. And of course, it's going to be judged against you. You're classified by Yeshua the Savior as an impostor, as someone who will be cast out, unfit for the kingdom. Now that's all the things that the Savior brings forth on him. This feast is a feast of unity. That's what it means. 7 times 7. Just think about that. 7 is complete. 7 times 7 is a completeness here that Yahweh showed as Romans, book of Romans, written by the great apostle Shaul, who was a Roman soldier, trained by one of the greatest priests, that is, one that had great knowledge of the law. And when I read his work, when I read Shaul's work, and I can see that he really knew the history of of Book 2. And he knew what Yahweh was showing there, and that's the reason he made the statement, that your works are shown in the feast days. And of course, the Pentecost is one of those days. It's what we must come to in unity, and the ones that receive these gifts, that want to receive the gifts, you certainly have an opportunity. But it really takes a lot of study, a lot of listening, close listening, and concentration so it can get into your mind. But turn over to Genesis. Let's start back in the beginning again here in Genesis 1, because Yahweh showed to Adam here. He showed this to Adam, and then later on, he showed it to others, but he showed his plan here. The reason that he made him and set him on the earth. And, of course, Adam recorded a bunch of stuff for us, a bunch of names that we wouldn't have today if Yahweh hadn't have recorded it and then set it to use in the languages, because Adam actually named all the animals on earth. And you think about it, he was a very smart man. Adam and Eve both repented of their sins. I can prove that, and of course we will see them in the kingdom unless there's something unrecorded that I don't know about. But I think anything that important we would know. But in verse 26, he shows the reason that he showed Adam the reason that he created him, and how he was going to multiply and replenish the earth, replenish it, because he allowed his sons to trespass on earth, and of course destroy themselves and destroy the earth with it. That's shown in the first few verses of chapter 1. And then in verse 26, he shows that he intends to make man in his own image, after his own likeness. And then over in chapter 2 and verse 9, he shows you there then that he is allowing two religions, of course, a false religion and then along with the true religion, the very strict religion. We have a bunch of strict elders now, Kohans and Kohanas, and you should be very thankful, because if you praise Yahweh, they're guarding your souls, and of course, if I see them lax on something, well, I'm guarding them too, and I do scream once in a while when I see this. But not very often anymore do I ever find any lackness in our Kohans or the Kohanas, and they're watching. When I know sometimes you think they're maybe a little bit harsh, but David repented to me this morning, because if you think he's harsh now, you should have seen him when I first met him. I'm going to cover some stuff here that I remember when we were working on years ago in translating the book of Yahweh, and of course we had people that were against and trying to bring in things that weren't agreeable with Yahweh and the rest of his writings, and David and I, we always worked together in this, but I always noticed the ones that were against it, they separated themselves. It makes me think of the word Pharisee, separatist. They separated themselves, and they would put things, sneak things in, and some things actually got biased. But we did. I think we did our best. Yahweh just allowed it to take place, but we're still getting those things out. But here in this, you see that Yahweh is allowing this false religion here to take place. And then if you look to chapter 4, where I kind of led up to this in the last sermon, But chapter 4 and verse 25, after Cain killed Abel. Now, of course, Cain was a what I was telling you was like a brute beast. And this is what people are coming to, and I want to show you more deeply what the Scripture shows you in this, and maybe it's the reason why we are still suffering with some today because of this. But Cain, there again, he separated himself. He separated himself from Yahweh. He separated himself from the great garden of Yahweh. And of course, from the face of Yahweh, that is, from His laws, statutes, and judgment. And he showed his rebellion in doing so. And of course, Abel, he kept the laws of Yahweh. The man was perfect, as Yahweh said. He was like Yeshua himself in striving to keep these laws of Yahweh and to write them for us. His work, of course, was being recorded. He was writing continually to get these things written. And of course, Noah then was the great preserver of all of this writings, the instructions from Yahweh. But here in chapter 4 in verse 25, he says, Adam knew his wife again, and she bore a son and named him Seth. Now this was after Cain had killed Abel. So he bore Seth, for Yahweh has appointed another seed for me in the place of Abel. So in the place of Abel means in doing the work that Abel did. And of course Abel brought forth the strict laws of Yahweh. And from Abel's work, of course, Adam and Eve became converted and repented of their sins. And then of course, they taught this to Seth, and apparently had some foresight in this, as you can see, because they prophesied that he would take Abel's place. He wouldn't be like Cain, but he would take Abel's place, whom Cain killed. And then you see the bloodline there, from Seth to Enoch and Enosh, and from there on down to Noah, who was the great preserver in verse 29, and all of these seed here that came down, you can see a general DNA here that's following this bloodline, and it's a pure bloodline here that hasn't gotten defiled down to Noah. And then you've got to remember now that this other tree is still in existence, and it's still roaming the land and deceiving as many people as it possibly can. And this is what Yahweh showed here. There was also tyrants who, like today, which shows the pattern of that religion that went out roaming, or the Crusades. They were tyrants. And of course, the Pope would tell the Crusaders, let's go over here and take this country, take their wealth. We can do this easily. It's the land flowing with milk and honey. And we'll make you rich. Of course, they never did. The Pope, the Vatican got all the land and all the wealth, and very little of it went to the people who went out and killed the people. We have this killing in several different ways. That every time I read this, it makes me think of these doctors, the surgeons. There was some surgeons. They went on this safari, the African safari, and you know what a safari is, African safari. That's where you get this big gun, big gun, and you go out here hunting this little animal, helpless animal, and you always they tell you to shoot him way back behind the shoulders because they want this trophy, you know. So you have to blow this big hole in his ribs, and and then walk up there and put your foot on him and hold your gun up like this, like you're what do you what do they call? I guess a tyrant. So, but anyway, they went on this safari, and of course the airlines love this when they do this because they pay to get all their guns on there and their suitcases, and it takes big money to go on an African safari. And then you have the guides that you have to pay big money, so this brings in a lot of taxes here and there. Well, now back to the original story. These guys went on this safari, and there was 5 of them. I don't remember what all the 4 said when they got back, but one of them was a surgeon, I remember, and the others was something else. And this they were telling what they got, and they finally came down to the surgeon, and they said, "Well, what did you get?" "Well, you're supposed to go out there, see, and kill a bunch of kill." And he said, "You know, I spent that whole time, wasted all this money, went out there to Africa. I didn't get to kill one single animal. I would have been better off to have went to the hospital." Okay. Well. Anyway, this is what I see in Cain, and I think of that every time I read this scripture. That they become now they become what the apostle said, a brute beast. That is, they have a beastly type character, attitude. And I'm not speaking of the doctors either. That was a joke. Our doctors are great. They do great work, and we got the best in the world in the House of Yahweh. Believe me. But in Genesis now 29, Genesis 5, and in verse 29, we see here he said, and he called his name Noah, saying, "This son will comfort us concerning our work." Well, of course, the work of Abel is what they were talking about here, and it being preserved by this man who Yahweh says he's going to bring a flood, and he's going to wipe out what we see in number 6. Because without the righteous guidance of a strict righteous priest, which Abel was, a hard-working priest who brought the laws of Yahweh perfectly, and that's not an easy thing to do, I'll guarantee you, to the people, and created quite a work here, one that was hated and envied by Cain. So they brought forth this man. The work that was brought forth from Abel to Noah here is shown in chapter 4, the last part of 4, and the verse and all of 5, all of verse 5, and then here you see in verse chapter 6 and verse 3, he says, "And Yahweh said, the men of this world will never subject themselves to my word." That is the way that it existed at this time, because after Abel was killed, then sin multiplied here, and tyrants they were carnally minded, as it says in verse 3. Thus their days shall be 120 years only at that time. And then verse 4, we see the tyrants, which you get more of a scope of these tyrants in the chapter 10 of Genesis, where is speaking of the institute, the tyrant institute that Cush created, called Nimrod. Nimrod means he rebelled, or this rebellious system. And of course, the system became tyrants, and that's where you get the Crusades. It was going on long before it was named Crusades, but that's what it was. In fact, the Apostle Shaul was a crusader. He was a roamer, a Roman roamer who went out arresting the citizens for keeping the laws of Yahweh. Well, it's still going on today, and the hatred is still here, as the Scripture shows it for this last day's work. Then Yahweh said that the wickedness of man, verse 5, was great in the earth, and every intent, the thoughts of man's hearts, was only evil continually. Now, if you remember, the Savior brought this very thing out in Matthew 24 and said it's going to be exactly like this, like it is right here in this chapter, in the last days. That's what your Savior showed you. In chapter 24 of Matthew. And then he says in verse 9, he said, "These are the beginnings of Noah, and a just man, perfect in his beginnings. Noah walked in the reverence of Yahweh, as is shown." He started back here in verse 26 of chapter 4 with the birth of Seth. And then in verse 26 he says, And as for Seth, to him also a son was born, whose name was Enosh. And it was then that the name of Yahweh began to be invoked again, after Abel. So this bloodline and the genes then started carrying this unperverted bloodline down to this end-time work then, where we had the Savior, who was perfect, without spot or blemish, without sin, totally without sin. The same thing came down through this bloodline as we see here in chapter 5. Part of it. Now, in verse 11, he says, "The earth also was corrupt before Yahweh, and the earth was filled with violence." The same thing we're seeing today. In fact, the violence in the schools right now, with the thousands of teachers are quitting. This is really getting concerned. Everyone is finally getting concerned about what they see taking place here. And the murders increasing throughout the United States, but throughout the world. And then terrorism. The terrorists, as we prefer to call them, and trying to defend themselves from what they think is tyranny. And that's the way they've classified it. And, of course, they're fighting for their religion as well as their lives. They don't want to submit to the Catholic Church, the Vatican, who, of course, owns most of the world at this time, controls most of the world. I have a recent map here. It may have been changed by now. If you can see the colors there, the green is Islam, and the yellow is Christianity. And you can compare those two right there. Now that's the map of the world. So you can see the part that is contrary and won't accept the Christianity or the Vatican's work. And the Vatican, of course, as I've been bringing out recently, comes from the 12 tribes. It started, of course, with Cain, and as First Yochanan says, all the world has gone the way of Cain. So here we see the violence now that Yeshua said would be in our lifetime. So Yahweh looked upon the earth, and indeed it was corrupt, for all flesh had corrupted their way on the earth. And Yahweh said to Noah, "The end of all flesh has come before me, for the earth is filled with violence through them, and I will destroy them with the earth." And of course, the next time then, when he allowed Noah to preserve the work of all these men, including Abel, and then from him and his sons then came forth then the bloodline that kept it in check, because the righteousness then was keeping in check the evil. So Yahweh kept it that way for a time period, and then he allowed, of course, the other to come in. But if you remember the history of these tribes now and the works coming forth, the work of Satan would try to destroy each work of Yahweh again. And then Yahweh, of course, would stop it like he did with Sodom and Gomorrah. And he says, and then remember these words also. He said that he would try them for a certain time, and then he would drive them from the nation, or scatter them into the world. And this is what you saw taking place with the 12 tribes. They were driven from Israel. They thought they were going voluntarily because they heard that there's a lot of money in Babylon to be made. But it was easy to convince them that Babylon and Rome, which sat on 7 hills, was the place where all the wealth was. So go there and make it big. And of course you see the same thing occurring today. Well, here he also had for Noah, he said in verse 32, we did get that. John, yes, we got that. Now in chapter 6 and verse 1, we see the evil increasing. And then in chapter 7 now, chapter 7, 1 through 3, he says, And Yahweh said unto Noah, Come into the ark, and all your household, for I have seen you righteous before me in this generation. You shall take with you 7 pairs of every clean animal, a male and his female, to 2 of the animals that are unclean. So you see the clean and the unclean species going into the ark here for Noah to preserve. Now, Yahweh established his covenant with Noah. If you look over to chapter 9, you see that the covenant was here before Abraham. And if you look at verse 1, chapter 9, verse 1, And Yahweh blessed Noah and his sons, and said to them, Multiply and fill the earth. Multiply and fill the earth. Okay? Now look on down to verse 3. Every clean moving thing that lives shall be food for you. I have given you all clean things, even as the green herbs. Verse 4, But you shall not eat flesh with its life. That is, its blood in it. Now, don't take this lightly. I think people do, and they tend to forget. And, of course, every prophet, every apostle spoke of this. And one even says, put a knife to your throat if you're tempted to partake of the king's table. Now, if you didn't have a choice, and it's either eat or starve to death, you might have something to lean back on here. But you are being severely judged. And I want you to see this in verse 5. It says, Surely your lifeblood I will demand an accounting. Now, the commentaries, they stay away from this. One of them dared to write, I'll read it to you here. It says, Surely your blood will I require at the hand of every beast. Now, that's the way the King James Version has it. And they actually don't want to read it properly because they do understand what it says, but here in this verse, but they are afraid to actually bring it out, or maybe they'd be looked down on if they do. But he says, this is a very obscure account. This is a very obscure account. This is a very obscure, but if taken literally, it seems to be an awful warning. And that's all they would say. It's an obscure account, but if taken literally, and they know what it literally says, so they avoid it. But the word account here, and it is accounting. In fact, the Amplified Bible here says, "But you shall not eat flesh with the life of it, which is its blood. And surely for your life blood I will require an accounting. Now, of course, the word account, it actually means justify. It means to elucidate. The word elucidate that they use here in trying to describe this Hebrew word, it means to make something clear, explain. To make something clear or explain. Now, if you'll think, I've told you you're on trial. I told you this back when before I was arrested that you were going to be. I told you after I was arrested and released that you are still on trial. It's you that's on trial. Yahweh has told me what is going to take place in my life. But you are on trial as to whether or not you will be with me in that kingdom, the kingdom of Yahweh. And of course, the accounting now. Now, I want you to understand this word right here. Accounting. And he's going to do this with blood. With blood. You got that? Now, the blood has to, an account. It actually means to tell, to judge, to be, to give a financial reckoning. If you remember, Yeshua said the kingdom of Yahweh is likened unto a man, an owner, who allotted his land out to different ones, and then on a certain day he required an accounting of the records. But now here we see that what is telling Yahweh something here is blood. What Yahweh is actually reading and what's going on record in heaven is the blood. And Yahweh says he's going to require an accounting from the hand of every beast. It will be required, I will require it from the hand of every beast, or the body of every beast that is butchered, where it goes, who ate it, and what was in it when it was eaten. Now, if you have an excuse, that's fine and dandy. I don't know of any excuses left anymore for this. We've gone to extremes to try to make it where you don't have to eat blood. Now, they did this when Yahweh brought the children of Israel out of Egypt. They started practicing this law. But it was a hard thing to quit. It was like they are addicted to it. Some person told me just here recently when I was discussing this, they said on a certain island that they take the blood of animals. Pig's blood is like the most. And I said, what, do they drink it? Well, yes, they drink it too, but said the best I remember, I don't want to remember it, I don't want to ever do it, but they made something like it would be, when they got through with it, they mixed it with milk and other things, but they took the blood of pigs and they boiled it to a certain consistency like cheese, and then they would slice it like cheese or bologna, and they would eat this blood. And of course, in this blood from a pig, the strychnine floats in the blood constantly. Their eggs float in there. Now, that's just one of the things we have found in pork. It wasn't until just a few years ago that Dr. Pfizer invented a telescope where we could see things microorganisms that by blowing them up, by enlarging them to hundreds of thousands of times larger than they are now, and in their original state, and then we can see it. When it's magnified that much, then we can see what it looks like with our eyes. I think they're still using Dr. Pfizer's work. I know there's a Dr. Pfizer company, corporation. I noticed where he's laying off about 6,000 hands now. So because of the economy, I don't know what's taking place, whether Japan is outdoing him in the price or in their corporation, but probably they're getting most of their stuff from Japan anyway. It's probably just a slump because they have no money to buy the instruments or the drugs, so maybe they're making do. But anyway, with his work, which was just a few years ago when he built this telescope, I don't remember the date now, but that enabled us also to see cancer cells from his telescope, a magnification of this thing where we could see it. So, and he was the one that said, that proved that a cancer cannot enter a cell, a clean cell, unless it's depleted of salt. The cancer cannot stand salt, so they won't enter that cell. Well, anyway, now, this was just a few years ago. But Yahweh is showing you here, for scoffers, He's saying that the life is in the blood, and I'm going to require, it shows an account to me, it gives me an account of every man and every beast, the blood. Well, do you remember now, Abel's blood cried out to Yahweh. So you see part of this accounting that is taking place here in this blood. Because Abel's blood was telling Yahweh something here. So this ties in. And then, of course, Yeshua adds to it. So does the apostles in this. And all the prophets is saying, don't eat the blood. And this is harped on over and over and over throughout the Scriptures. So when Yahweh brought the children of Israel out of Egypt, He went to teach them, don't eat blood. And then he actually instructs them in the priesthood. And it instructs the priesthood exactly how to kill an animal. So the animal will be kosher for you to eat. Now we know that Abel was given this because Abel sacrificed animals and Yahweh said, yes, this is okay. It was acceptable. The sacrifice was acceptable. Under Yisrayl, he taught Moshe how to teach the priest to do this very thing. And they studied and they learned for years. I'll show you how many in a minute, because it is actually shown. And Yahweh would try these people until they died, and then He'd try their seed until they died, and all the accounting was made for actually 490 years, if you remember. 490 years, up until the time of Samuel. But I'm getting ahead of myself here. But anyway, go back here to verse 5 again. He says, surely of your blood, of your lifeblood, I will demand an accounting. And he says, and they say, but this is the warning here to us from the commentators. It says, but if taken literally, it seems to be an awful warning. Well, of course, they knew this. They knew what this was talking about, and they knew that all of this is going on their record, but they don't want to talk about it because all the world is guilty of what is taking place here, and that, of course, is eating blood of animals, mainly because they don't know how to kill them, but also they're killing sick animals, and even those animals are being forced to eat sick animals. You know, this is the kind of shape the world has got in today. Now, when you look at all the warnings here, there is something quite extreme about this. Well, Pentecost. Here we get down to Pentecost now. The day we're celebrating right now. And of course, Pentecost means unity. And it means 7 times 70. 7 times 70. That's what the Savior said. He gave you those figures, 7 times 70. Unity in spirit and in body, or in your blood, which is telling on you. You got that? Your blood, which is a permanent record, a permanent accounting of what is taking place. When you ate that and you thought it was secret, nobody knew about it, Yahweh knows about it. Yahweh knows, especially for you who your record is being kept exact right now. Of course, the world's is too, because he is keeping track of the world and what a miserable state it's in, and all of that's going on record. But nothing is missed on any of you. Boys, listen to me. Nothing is missed on any of you. And he has this perfect record of you through the blood that you ate a year ago, 100 years ago, the blood you fed your baby through a cookie that you should have read the label before you gave it to him or her. Yes, you are responsible for your children too. Remember, Yahweh says, train them up in the way they should go. Now, if you put this blood in their brain, and that's where you're putting it when you give them blood, no matter what it comes from, whether it's the blasted butter that you're getting from the grocery store that we used to try to purify before because we couldn't get the money to start a dairy. So we'd try to purify this stuff for everyone because we knew that everyone wanted it, but we were working to get it for you. And then we finally got our dairy, praise Yahweh, and where you could actually take a jug of milk and slug it down and know that it is healthy. Praise Yahweh. And your butter and honey you shall eat and enjoy it. It is very, very tasty. And then the meat, I said, until we can get something to give the people what they need, there's no use in telling them, because you do need meat, but you'll have an excuse that way. But now you have no excuse, because now we have a kosher slaughterhouse. But now, that's not the only thing you have to watch for. See, you've got to watch for the what you buy in the store, because they hide this stuff. And what is clean 1 week, we have people checking it all the time. That's the reason you need to stay in touch with Abelin. Get your answers, questions answered from Abelin, because we do have people staying in touch with them. And of course we make them. We either make them put it in writing or we don't use it. And a lot of them won't put it in writing, so we just say, okay, that's fine. We'll find somebody who will. But we are guarding this stuff for you because we know how important it is. It's important on my account because I'm going to be held accountable for either telling you or not telling you. Well, I'm telling you now. So you have it's off of my back. Not really, because, I would not let any one of you go willingly at all. I'd keep harping at you until get totally out of my sight. But back to now Pentecost here, and we see unity of spirit. This is completeness. This is unity. This is the celebration of the Feast of Fullness. That's what Pentecost is, a celebration of the Feast of Fullness, when you should be full of the Spirit that comes from keeping Yahweh's laws, of course. The Feast of Unity. Let's turn over to Acts now. This is where I have to start hurrying, and I don't like that. But in Acts, the 2nd chapter now, we come up through the apostles. The prophets. We come through the prophets, and it was a it was a battle because you had Cain that all the world was going after here in this tree. You had Yahweh's people who was more or less confined to Galilee area because they were persecuted otherwise. So they were kind of confined to that one area there in Galilee where Yeshua and his apostles were brought up. And then you had the roaming Romans, who were the Pharisees, and the army that Daniel said would join them, which would pollute the sanctuary, speaking of the temple at that time, which they did. And Titus was the one that destroyed it. So they would roam the countryside, and they had their crusades, and the teachers who they could prove and get away with it, they would kidnap like they did Lot. That's what they intended for him, because there was rewards for those that was brought by the kings to Babylon or to the roaming soldiers to sell. It makes me think of what goes on the police department today with what they call illegal aliens. I still think we ought to take that Statue of Liberty. We ought to put a frown on her face and maybe a gun in one hand and holding a sign up in the other hand saying, "All of you aliens go home. This means all of you who came from Europe, which is everybody. I don't want you here anymore. Get out." We should send this out for all the world to see. Who is an alien? Even the American Indians came here uninvited by permission of Yahweh. Are we going to run them out too? Well, that's being fought over right now anyway. But back to us now. Here's the day of Pentecost, and we come down to Yeshua's time, and then here is a people still in Galilee, still working, but Yahweh sends them out then to work in Jerusalem. And of course, Yochanan, in fulfilling the prophecy about him, he had to go into Babylon, which was Jerusalem, of course, at that time. Now, I'm not saying that Jerusalem was Babylon. There was a Babylon, yes, out of Israel, where they took the people, they trained them as they did with Daniel. If you remember, they took Daniel to Babylon, him and his buddies, and then the king says, "Bring me all the best of the best here, and the people that we can teach our literature in the Chaldees language." They didn't want them speaking their Hebrew anymore. Well, Yochanan and the families there, if you remember when Yeshua was born, the king tried to find Yeshua to kill him, because he knew he was going to be teaching the laws of Yahweh. That's what the prophecy showed. And this was an enemy to their work, which they were trying to bring forth the Babylonian Talmud that was written in Babylon. And this was the literature they were teaching, that you've got to follow the oral laws, and we're the ones that's going to tell you the oral laws, of course. And you either follow it or you die. Well, of course, Daniel and his buddies, they were well trained in the laws of Yahweh, so they couldn't deceive them. But you'll find that in the first chapter of Daniel, if you want to read it, where he was taken to Babylon. And of course, history shows the best of the best then was taken to Rome to build the empire in Rome, which took over the whole world, the roaming Romans. These now, the disciples, were the leftovers of Yeshua, who Yahweh gave them peace in Galilee to do the work that we're reading here in Acts. In fact, Book 2 was all written in Galilee, except for the book of Revelations. And of course, it was written on the island called Patmos, and Yochanan, the recorder of Revelations, he was held prisoner in a coal mine. That's what the history says. Well, here now we see the Acts of the Apostles, and preparing this for you and writing down what is going on as we're doing today. the acts of the last days, priest, the Kohanas, the work, the total work that is going on here, it is also going down in a book called the Book of Yisrayl, of which there are several volumes right now. Praise Yahweh. Well, Yahweh wrote this for you. And he says here now in Acts 2, he says, now when the day of Pentecost was fully come, they were with one accord. So we see this prophesied. we see this, it's showing right off here, showing that there was no disunity, which means they didn't eat blood. Let's go back to Yahweh. Just hold your place here, but go over to Yahweh, the second chapter, because there's a prophecy here for us. But when you eat blood, there's all kinds of life particles. Now, Dr. Pfizer's telescope shows us some. They don't show us all of them. But we can see trichina. Now, we can see the eggs of the trichina. We know that we can find right now in the baby's umbilical cords, we can find through this technology, we can find around 300 contaminants in the baby's umbilical cord right now. Now this is today in a civilized world. Now, in what we call contaminants, what they're calling contaminants is chemicals that they have made. They didn't really create these chemicals. To make a pesticide right now, what would kill, like if you ate something that was bad for you, what would kill that to keep it from killing you? Well, where would you go to find this? Well, a buzzard has it in his gut. He can eat any kind of food that he wants to and doesn't get sick because he has some pest inside his stomach. The pig does too. The pig can eat just about anything a buzzard can, and it has the protection. Well, what are we doing now? We are taking the insides of pigs and buzzards and things like this, and we're making what we call pesticides out of them to attack these things that are killing our plants and animals and so forth. This is how we get our antibiotics and so forth. We grow these things that are raised in the guts of animals, which are in the life blood of animals, and many of the clean animals that we eat also have protection that you don't have, because they live off of grass and weeds and twigs and things like that. And Yahweh put within them a protection in their bodies, so they can use this. Science can actually use this. So it's not like they're creating something new, some microorganism that is new. No, they're finding it and they're using it. Now, the problem is right now, like the pig is immune from all of these parasites that are in dead meat that starts breaking it down. The pigs and the buzzards, they're immune to this. So what takes place when they use these pests from the insides of animals and start putting them in the human beings? Then you become immune to what they're trying to doctor you with. Now, this is what we're facing today. So I was just reading an article this morning where it says we've got to find new antibiotics. These diseases that we have now, which came from the animals, they are immune to everything we've got. So we've got to find new ones. And they said the world is getting in sad shape and said, we've got to hurry. They know it's not going to last much longer. They're running out of a protection for you or something to kill the diseases. Now, I know you've been protected, and I can tell from the looks on most of your faces you're very healthy. But the world is not like you are. You've come out of the world, and that's the reason you're showing signs of health now. I remember, and I noticed somebody put it on the wall back there. When I first saw a lot of you guys, I thought you was going to die real soon. You started getting better when you stopped eating unclean food and started eating foods that would start rebuilding your health. But one of the main things that hold people back is blood. And of course, when you eat blood, you age real fast. When you eat meat, I remember when I was a child, and this was the way the world was for 6,000 years. When I was a child, it was hard to butcher an animal. Now, you didn't have refrigeration, so what are you going to do? Here's a cow that'll weigh 700 pounds, which you're going to get about 300 pounds of meat out of. Your meal for the day, or 3 days, would maybe be 3 pounds of meat. What are you going to do with the rest of it? But see, that was the shape that everybody was in back then. Now, the grocery stores in Purcell and Lexington, Oklahoma, who my dad did butchering for, they would line up people. They would organize the people, and they'd say, I'm going to have so much meat. What parts do you want? So they'd pay in advance for the meat. So he'd tell them, you be here on a certain date, because that meat's going to be here, and you've got to be here to pick it up when it comes. Well, this is the way things was arranged when I was a child. Well, now, see, it's much different. At that time, when refrigeration started coming in and freezers started coming in, meat was prepared. It was kept in the freezers and refrigerators. Then it was set out in the store market. You could go there any time of day, and you could start buying meat. Something that you had maybe once a week when I was a child, maybe once every 2 weeks. Dad used to say that Mother could take a small chicken and make 2 huge big pots of chicken and dumplings. You may not find any chicken in it, but you'd find a lot of dumplings, he said. Well, of course, that's the way it was with us when I was a child, and most people were the same way. Chickens were readily available, but so was fish now, if you lived close to a place where there was fish. You know what, Yeshua, the food that actually says that he ate? Fish. Yes, fish. One of the best foods for your brain is omega-3, which comes from fish. And Yeshua is recorded because they lived around the Sea of Galilee, and I myself caught fish from the Sea of Galilee very easily. It wasn't a hard thing to do, I noticed. Anyone could go there and get it. Of course, somebody had to clean it and cook it, so that sets you back some too. But I remember that's what we lived on mostly, was fish. That it was available in the winter as well in the summer. And we had a place where we lived that wasn't but about 100 yards from the house, where we could go there, and Dad would take his 22, and when the carp would come up to suck on a log because they eat algae, he would shoot them in the head. They'd turn over and float, and he would pick them up and take them for dinner. And it was an easy thing to do at that time. So we had a lot of fish to eat. But anyway, back to this now in Yael. Because we're at a place here where the world has changed. Their main diet now is meat. In getting to this spot, I need to tell you this too. In getting to this point of history where we are right now, the pigs, they were something that was used to clean up the earth. Pigs will eat just about anything that you throw away. You can let slop lay in a bucket for a week and pour it in a pig trough, and the pig will stick his nose down in it and just gobble it up. But they're made to do that. But there got to be too many pigs, and of course this is the reason for pushing the hog market. It's a cheap meat to raise. I remember when I was a child that a cow would die or a horse would die. Well, of course, somebody needed to pick it up because there it was, decaying and stinking. And the farmer could go out there and work for days trying to dig a hole to put a horse or a cow in. Or they could call a man named Jody Sparlin in Purcell, and he would come out and get that cow and take it right to town, in town. Now, this is on the south side of Purcell, and he would throw it out to his hogs. So he raised, it didn't cost him anything to raise these hogs. Costs very little now because it's still mainly scraps. It's waste food that's going back into these into hog feed. So anyway, this was a way to get rid of the hogs that multiply. You could have them around to eat the garbage, but they'd also multiply, and then you could eat them and take their remains and give it to somebody. But this is the way it's changed, and they season up pork where it'll taste good to you, and then. But in this pork, of course, it's life's blood that's not supposed to be going into your blood, but it'll tell a tale on you. If you don't watch, you can go to the grocery store and nothing is shown on a label except natural flavoring. Well, what could be more natural than the pig and the gut? And of course, that's natural, so that's the only way they're required to label it is just natural flavoring when it comes from a pig. I think it was McDonald's that used the same thing to go on their French fries. And finally, the Muslims, I believe it was, found out that this was going into their French fries, and now there's lawsuits going on if they haven't settled it. But they apologized, but they didn't say anything about taking it out. So it may be still in the French fry. But, when you're cooking bacon, or when somebody's cooking bacon, you can smell it a half a mile away. It's not really the bacon that they're going after here. It's the smoke flavor that they put into this. Pig meat is tasteless, I'm told. But they can flavor it up with these flavors and get you to eat it. Well, that's what they've got on the market today. They've got all kinds of meat for you to eat. And, of course, each one of them has blood in it. Every one of them that I know of on the market has blood. Even the ones they call kosher has blood. They also have things in them that we're told, and they won't dispute it to us, they have things that we've found out about that is not even beef in their beef kosher, what they call kosher products on the market. So it's something you need to watch out about because you won't be in unity with Yahweh or His house unless you pay attention to this and start abiding by it. Come out from her, be separate, touch not the unclean thing. It's in the blood. Don't put it in your body. Well, here in Yael now, if we're true as the apostles were, we got some great promises coming. We know we're going to receive this too. This is Yahweh's house. It's the only house of Yahweh on the face of the earth. And we got promises that no one else has, brethren. We're not, praise Yahweh. We're not like Christianity. We got something we can get our teeth into here. And we can hang on to it. We got prophecy after prophecy prophesying of this last day's work that Yahshua Himself is high priest over. And that goes from Genesis clear through to Revelation. No other religion on the face of the earth, brethren, has what we got right here. Well, here now in Yael, let me see. I don't want to read all of this. Let me read just a little of it, though. Verse 28, chapter 2 and verse 28, it says, "And it will come to pass that I will pour out my spirit upon all flesh, and your sons and your daughters." Now that all flesh, of course, it's a little bit different than the Hebrew. The Hebrew says all that reverence Yahweh. All who reverence Yahweh. All the flesh that reverences Yahweh. Well, how would he know what flesh? In the blood that's testifying. Remember that. Don't think you got him fooled. You haven't. "And it will come to pass afterwards that I will pour out my spirit on all the flesh that reverences Yahweh, and your sons and your daughters, which means we're going to have sons and daughters now that's going to reverence Yahweh. We got those sons and daughters, brethren. They are striving to do Yahweh's will. They'll correct you if they see you get out of line. And praise them for it, okay? Praise them. Tell them how joyous you are that they corrected you. Your old men will dream dreams, and your young men will see visions, and also upon the servants and upon the handmaids, which you are, all of your servants, all of your handmaids, to Yahweh in those days I will pour out my Spirit. I will also show wonders in the heavens and in the earth, blood and fire and pillars of smoke. That's coming from, of course, the world, the confused world, the Babylonian system. The sun will be turned into darkness, the moon into blood, before the great and terrible day of Yahweh comes, before the joyous reverence of Yahweh comes. And whoever will call with the name of Yahweh, you don't find anyone calling with the name of Yahweh today except the House of Yahweh. Now, correctly now, there's others out here using the 6 letters here and pronouncing it, but they're not doing the rest of what Yahweh says, which says, go to the place where I choose to place my name, and there call upon my name, and it's quite different. So he says, they will be delivered. They will be delivered. For in Mount Zion, which means the promotion of Yahweh, those who lift up holy hands to Yahweh, there will be deliverance, as Yahweh has said, among this remnant who reverences the name of Yahweh, repents of sin, which part of it, of course, is eating blood, coming to unity with Yahweh. You won't have many of these things bugging you. That's what they are. They're bugs, and you won't have many of them bugging you if you'll stop eating this blood, come out from among them, touch not the unclean thing, and Yahweh will receive you. I love you, brothers and sisters. May Yahweh bless you.